I never told my daughter about the room behind the grandfather clock. For 2 years, she schemed with a man who saw dollar signs where I saw family, and when they finally broke through the wall looking for my will, they found something that destroyed them both. I'm grateful you're here. Before I reveal what was behind that clock, comment, protect, if you believe some secrets are worth keeping until the truth demands them. Quick note. This story uses fictional elements to convey real lessons about greed, loyalty, and the price of betrayal. The message matters. There's a sound old clocks make when they're dying. Not the ticking that stops cleanly. It's the mainspring unwinding. A slow, metallic exhale, like the mechanism is sighing its last breath. I've heard that sound 10,000 times in my life, and it still gets to me. My name is Henry Callahan. I'm 68 years old. Most people in Savannah know me as the man who keeps time alive. Callahan's Clock and Watch has stood on Bull Street for 44 years, wedged between a flower shop and a law office, 3 blocks from Forsyth Park. The building is old brick, built in 1910, with a green copper awning and a window display that hasn't changed its spirit since my wife first arranged it. Pocket watches on velvet. A ship's chronometer from 1880. A cuckoo clock, carved by a German craftsman who died before television was invented. Inside, the shop smells like brass polish, walnut oil, and patience. Every surface holds something waiting to tick again. I fix clocks. That's the simple version. The truth is more complicated, because my wife taught me that clocks aren't just machines. They're promises. Promises that time matters, that moments are worth counting, that someone cared enough to build something beautiful and wind it faithfully. My wife, Eleanor, understood time better than anyone I've ever known. She was the one who started this business, back when Bull Street was still sleepy and nobody believed a clock shop could survive the digital age. People will always want something real, Henry, she told me on our first anniversary, her hands stained with brass cleaner. Something that ticks and breathes and reminds them they're alive. Eleanor passed 9 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She was 56, and it took her in 4 months, diagnosed in August, gone by December. Our daughter, Claire, was 25 then. She flew home from Atlanta, sat by her mother's bed in our house on Gaston Street, and held Eleanor's hand through the morphine fog and the long silences. 3 days before the end, Eleanor asked me to bring something from the shop. A pocket watch, a Breguet from 1835, that we'd restored together. Our first major project as a couple. Rose gold case, hand-engraved with ivy leaves, a movement so precise it still lost less than a second per day after nearly 2 centuries. She held it against her chest like a child holds a stuffed animal. "This is yours now," she whispered. "Eleanor, that watch is it's worth exactly what it needs to be worth." Her eyes, once sharp as green glass, were cloudy now. "Keep it in the shop. When the time comes, you'll understand." "What time?" "Understand what?" "You'll know, Henry. Trust the watch." I didn't understand. The morphine, I thought. The illness blurring her thoughts. But I promised. The way you promise someone who's leaving completely, desperately, without needing to understand why. Eleanor died on a Wednesday morning while I was holding her hand, and the church bells from the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist were ringing across the square. Claire sobbed until she couldn't breathe. I stood at the funeral holding that Breguet pocket watch because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. 9 years later, I finally understood what Eleanor was trying to tell me. She knew. She knew our daughter would lose her way, and she left me the only tool that could save us. The years after Eleanor's death were quiet. Claire moved back to Atlanta, built a career in commercial real estate, married a man named Thomas Whitfield. Thomas was 31, an architect, tall, steady, the kind of man who sketched buildings on napkins and remembered your birthday without his phone reminding him. He designed affordable housing for a nonprofit. Didn't make much money, but made a lot of difference. I loved Thomas the way you love someone who treats your child the way she deserves. He'd visit the shop, spend hours watching me work, asking about gear ratios and escapement mechanisms. He had genuine respect for craftsmanship, for things built to last. For a while, I thought Claire had found her footing. The restlessness Eleanor had worried about, that hunger for more, always more, seemed to have softened. Claire and Thomas bought a house in Midtown Atlanta. They came down to Savannah every month. Life felt close to good. Then 2.5 years ago, everything shifted. Claire stopped visiting. Calls grew short. When she did come to Savannah, the conversations felt like interviews. "Dad, what's your insurance situation? Have you had your heart checked lately? This building must be worth a fortune now. Bull Street is booming." At first, I told myself she was being practical. She worked in real estate. She thought in terms of property values and portfolios. But there was something in her voice, something cold and measuring, that reminded me of the way buyers assess a building they plan to demolish. Then she mentioned a name: Derek Saunders. "We hired a new associate at the firm," she told me over the phone in March, 2.5 years ago. "Derek Saunders, 27. Just got his MBA from Georgia State. Brilliant with numbers. He's been helping me restructure our client portfolios." Within weeks, Derek's name was in every conversation. Derek suggested a new investment strategy. Derek found an undervalued property in Buckhead. Derek thinks I should push for the senior VP position. Thomas noticed. "Sounds like this Derek runs the whole office," he said one Sunday at my kitchen table, trying to keep it light. Claire's eyes went sharp. "Don't be insecure, Tom. He's 27. He's just ambitious." The way she said his name, Tom, not Thomas, dismissive, almost cruel. My stomach turned. By summer, Claire brought Derek to the shop. "He loves antiques," she said. "Wants to see your collection." Derek was handsome in a forgettable way, gym-built, expensive haircut, a smile that arrived too quickly and stayed too long. He shook my hand like he'd practiced in a mirror. "Mr. Callahan, this place is incredible. The craftsmanship, the history, you don't see this anymore." But his eyes weren't on the clocks. They were measuring the crown molding, the original hardwood floors, the 18-foot ceilings. He was appraising the building. 2 days later, Claire called. "Dad, have you thought about selling the shop? Bull Street properties are going for $2 million easy." That was the first night I opened Eleanor's pocket watch and held it to my ear, listening to its steady tick like a heartbeat. "What were you trying to tell me, love?" Thomas called me in September of that year, late at night. His voice was wrecked. "She's having an affair, Henry." I tracked her phone to an apartment in Buckhead. Her car was there until midnight. She told me she was at a client dinner. My chest tightened. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. I love her. But she looks at me like I'm furniture she's tired of." I told him what I'd told myself. Don't confront her yet. Not without proof. Not without understanding the full picture. Thomas thought I was being cautious. The truth was, I already suspected something bigger than an affair. Because the week before, Claire had asked me casually, over lunch at the old Pink House, how much I thought the shop, the house, and Eleanor's estate were worth combined. "Just for planning purposes, Dad. You're 66. It's responsible to think about these things." I'd done the math myself. The shop building, $2.1 million. The house on Gaston, $1.8 million. Eleanor's trust fund, $900,000. The clock collection, insured for $600,000. Retirement accounts, savings, miscellaneous, another $400,000. My daughter was calculating $5.8 million. Unlike the man in some story who waited years to act, I moved fast. Eleanor didn't raise a fool, and 44 years of clockwork taught me that timing is everything. You don't wait for the spring to break. You fix it when you hear the first skip. Within 2 weeks, I'd done 3 things. First, I called my lawyer, Margaret Chen, and began restructuring everything: new will, conditional trust, ironclad documentation requirements. Second, I hired a private investigator, Frank Hobson, ex-Army CID, now running a one-man shop in Savannah. Quiet, methodical, the kind of man who could follow a shadow without casting one. Third, I started my own documentation, but I didn't use a notebook. I used clocks. See, Eleanor had shown me something years ago. almost as an afterthought. The Breguet pocket watch, the one she'd held against her chest on her deathbed, had a false back, a compartment behind the movement, sealed with a mechanism that required pressing the crown at exactly 7:15 while simultaneously sliding the case back a quarter inch. She discovered it during restoration. Inside, we'd found a love letter from 1842, folded thin as a butterfly wing. "Every great clock has secrets," Eleanor had said, laughing. "You just have to know where to look." I spent that October preparing 4 timepieces. The Breguet pocket watch got the most critical item, a USB drive containing every piece of digital evidence I'd collect over the coming months. The grandfather clock in my workshop, a Howard and Davis from 1855, 7 feet tall, with a case deep enough to hide a family Bible, got a false panel installed behind the pendulum housing. Inside, copies of my new will, Margaret Chen's legal memos, and Eleanor's handwritten letter about the trust fund. A mantel clock, French, 1870s, with a removable dial plate, held printed photographs and Frank Hobson's surveillance reports, and a ship's chronometer from the HMS Resolute, 1890, its navigation compartment now housing audio recordings. When Claire visited that Christmas, she walked past all 4 pieces without a glance. To her, they were inventory. Dusty relics of her father's obsolete profession. She had no idea they were loaded weapons. Frank Hobson delivered his first report in January, a year and a half before the reckoning. Claire and Derek Saunders had been sharing a luxury apartment in Buckhead since at least August. Lease under Derek's name, but Claire's credit card paid half the rent. Frank had photographs Claire's car in the garage at 11 p.m. On nights she'd told Thomas she was showing properties. Derek and Claire at a restaurant in Virginia Highland. His hand on her thigh under the table. A weekend trip to Hilton Head booked under both names. But the real prize came in March, when Frank, who'd gotten friendly with a bartender at the building's rooftop bar, managed to record a conversation between Claire and Derek on the terrace. The audio was slightly muffled by wind, but clear enough. Derek's voice. "So the old man's got what? Almost 6 million total? When do we see any of it?" Claire. "Patience. He's 67. He works 12-hour days in a basement with no ventilation, handling chemicals. His doctor's been after him about his blood pressure for years." Derek. "And if nature doesn't cooperate?" Claire laughed. "Then we help nature along. I don't mean that literally. I mean we convince him to retire. Sell the shop. Liquidate. Once the assets are liquid, it's easier to manage." Derek. "And Thomas?" "Thomas gets nothing in the divorce. Georgia's an equitable distribution state, and I've been moving assets for months. By the time my lawyer's done, Thomas will be lucky to keep his car." I listened to that recording in my workshop at 2 in the morning, surrounded by clocks ticking in the darkness. My daughter's voice, cool and clinical, discussing my life expectancy like a market forecast, discussing her husband a good man, a kind man, like an obstacle to be discarded. I played it twice. Then I sealed the USB drive inside the Breguet and went upstairs to make coffee. My hands were steady. I'd expected this. Eleanor had expected this. The clocks were ready. Over the next year, the evidence accumulated like sediment. Frank documented everything, every meeting, every lie, every financial maneuver. Claire had been quietly transferring assets from her joint accounts with Thomas into personal accounts. She'd taken out a $200,000 line of credit against their house without Thomas's knowledge. She'd even begun researching my medical history, calling my doctor's office, pretending to be my insurance coordinator. Thomas, meanwhile, was falling apart. Claire had mastered the art of gaslighting, pulling him close when he got suspicious, pushing him away when he got comfortable. "You're being paranoid, Tom. I think you need therapy. Why can't you just trust me?" He called me every few weeks, each time sounding more hollow. But I'd made him a promise. "Hold on. Trust me. When I move, I'll move with enough evidence to end this cleanly." And I did something the old man in a storybook wouldn't think to do. I gave copies of everything to Margaret Chen. Every document, every recording, every photograph, backed up in her office safe, in a safety deposit box at Savannah Bank. and on encrypted cloud storage. If something happened to me, the evidence would survive. Claire could tear my shop apart brick by brick and still never destroy what I'd built. The clocks in the shop were insurance, dramatic insurance, the kind that would make an impact at the right moment. But the real protection was lawyered, backed up, and fireproof. Claire came to the shop one Saturday in June, a year ago, unannounced. Said she was looking for Eleanor's old insurance documents. My assistant, Ruth Pemberton, who'd worked for me 20 years and loved Eleanor like a sister, called me immediately. When I arrived, the security cameras showed Claire in my workshop, opening drawers, checking files, looking behind picture frames. She'd spent 15 minutes searching, and 3 times she'd glanced at the grandfather clock, the mantel clock, the ship's chronometer. Each time, she'd looked away. Not worth her attention. She walked right past the Breguet pocket watch, sitting in its velvet cradle on my workbench. Didn't even touch it. To Claire, it was just another dead man's timepiece. That fall, things accelerated. Thomas moved out of their Atlanta house. No drama, he just packed his bags one morning and drove to his brother's place in Decatur. He called me that night. I can't pretend anymore, Henry. She doesn't even bother hiding it now. Derek's cologne is on our couch cushions. Claire filed for divorce in November. Her attorney was aggressive, demanding the house, the retirement accounts, alimony. Thomas's lawyer countered with evidence of the affair, the hidden accounts, the fraudulent credit line. The divorce turned ugly fast. And through it all, Claire kept circling me. Visits to the shop, calls about my health, questions about the will. Have you updated your estate plan, Dad? With everything changing in my life, I want to make sure your wishes are clear. My wishes were crystal clear. She just hadn't heard them yet. I made the call on a Tuesday in January, 7 weeks ago. Claire answered on the second ring. Dad? Everything okay? Everything's fine. I want to have dinner. You, Thomas, and me. The Griffin Tea Room. January 18th. 7 o'clock. Silence. Then, Thomas? Dad, we're in the middle of a divorce. I know. But this is about family. About my estate. I think it's time we discuss the future. The shift in her voice was immediate. Oh, yes. Absolutely. I think that's really smart, Dad. Private dining room. I'll make the arrangements. After I hung up, I called Thomas. It's time. What do you need me to do? Show up. Bear witness. And trust me. I've trusted you for 2 years, Henry. I'm not stopping now. Then I called Margaret Chen. January 18th. Is everything ready? Everything's ready. Detective Holloway will be in the main dining room in case things escalate. They won't escalate. My daughter is going to be too shocked to move. I spent the morning of January 18th in my workshop, laid everything out on the bench like a surgeon's instruments. The Breguet pocket watch, a leather portfolio with printed evidence, the ship's chronometer containing the audio recordings, now transferred to a small Bluetooth speaker that fit in my jacket pocket, and a framed photograph of Eleanor, taken the year before she died, holding the Breguet and smiling at the camera. I looked at her for a long time. I hope this is what you meant, love. I hope this is when the watch was supposed to speak. The Griffin's private dining room was small and elegant. Candles, white linen, windows overlooking the courtyard garden. Claire arrived first, designer dress, perfect makeup, expensive perfume. She looked like someone expecting a celebration. Thomas came 10 minutes later. Quiet. Tense. Our eyes met. I nodded. Almost over. We ordered. Claire made small talk, her new apartment, a colleague's promotion, a restaurant she'd discovered in Midtown. She was performing ease, killing time until the subject she actually cared about. Halfway through the main course, she couldn't wait anymore. So, Dad, you mentioned estate planning. I did. And you've made decisions? Several. But first, I want to give you something. I reached into my bag and placed the Breguet on the table. Candlelight caught the rose gold case, the hand-engraved ivy. Claire's face went uncertain. Mom's watch? Open the back. Dad, I don't. Open it, Claire. Her hands trembled as she pressed the case back. It clicked, and the false compartment slid open. Inside, a folded letter, yellowed with age. Eleanor's handwriting. Claire unfolded it slowly. I watched her eyes move across the words. Eleanor had written it during her last week, when the morphine was low and her mind was sharp with final clarity. Claire, my darling girl, if your father has given you this watch, it means you've lost your way. I know, because I saw it in you before you saw it in yourself. That hunger, that mistakes price for value. Your father fixes broken things. Clocks, trust, families. But he cannot fix greed. Only you can do that. I pray you choose to. All my love. Always. Mom. Claire's face crumbled. Dad. What is this? Listen. I pressed play on the speaker in my pocket. Derek's voice filled the room. So the old man's got what? Almost 6 million total? Claire's own voice answered. Patience. He's 67. His doctor's been after him about his blood pressure for years. And if nature doesn't cooperate, then we help nature along. The color drained from Claire's face like water from a cracked vase. Thomas stood. His chair didn't fall. He set it back carefully, the way an architect handles things. He looked at Claire with an expression I'll never forget. Not anger, not hatred, pity. Then he walked out without a word. That recording is 18 months old, I said. My voice was ice, and I hated how steady it sounded. I have 2 years of documentation, surveillance photographs, financial records, audio evidence, witness testimony, your search history on my medical conditions, the credit line you took against Thomas's house, everything. I placed the leather portfolio on the table. Inside, Frank Hobson's reports, bank statements, photographs of Claire and Derek at restaurants, at the apartment, at Hilton Head, screenshots of text messages Frank had obtained through legal channels, Margaret Chen's legal summary. Copies are with my lawyer, in a bank vault, and on encrypted backup. You could burn this shop to the ground and the evidence would still exist. Claire stared at the portfolio like it was a bomb. Dad, please, I can't explain. You spent 2 years waiting for me to die. You discussed my blood pressure like a stock price. You stole from your husband. You brought a con man into our family and let him appraise our life like a foreclosure. Derek said we weren't. Derek cleaned out your bank account 3 days ago. I watched her face. She didn't know. $47,000. Transferred to an offshore account. He also maxed out the credit card you gave him $22,000. Frank tracked him to a flight to Costa Rica yesterday morning. He's gone. Claire. She went white, then gray. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. The door opened. Detective Holloway walked in. Miss Callahan, I have some questions I'd like to ask you. Your attorney should probably be present. Claire looked between us. You planned this. The dinner, the watch, all of it. Your mother planned it. 9 years ago. She hid that letter inside a watch because she knew this day would come. She gave me the tool to protect our family. I just wound the spring. Claire broke. Not performative tears, the real kind. The kind that come when every lie collapses at once and there's nothing left to hide behind. I'm sorry, she whispered. Dad, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. But time might. I picked up the Breguet, closed its compartment gently, slipped it back into my pocket. Detective Holloway will drive you to the station. Call a lawyer. I left her sitting at that table, Eleanor's letter still in her hands. Downstairs, Thomas was at the bar, staring at an untouched bourbon. It's done, I said. He nodded slowly. Does it feel like winning? It feels like surgery. Necessary and terrible. Thomas turned to me, eyes red but dry. You saved me, Henry. 2 years ago, I was ready to believe her, ready to think I was crazy. You kept me sane. You kept yourself sane. I just gave you something to hold on to. He finished the bourbon in one swallow. I got a job offer. Charlotte. New firm. Sustainable architecture. I leave next week. Good. Build something beautiful. I will. He gripped my hand. For all of us. The aftermath came fast. Palmetto Properties terminated Claire. The same week, ethics violations, client fund irregularities, Frank Hobson's evidence helped the DA build a case. Conspiracy to defraud, financial elder abuse, credit fraud. Derek Saunders was arrested at the Costa Rica airport trying to board a flight to Panama, extradited back to Georgia. Arraigned on 12 counts. He did not get away. Claire's divorce finalized in 3 weeks. Thomas got the house, the retirement accounts, and a clean break. Claire got nothing except the wreckage she'd built. Savannah talked. Of course it did. Small city, old money, long memories. For weeks, I couldn't walk to Forsyth Park without someone stopping me. Ruth fielded calls at the shop. I kept the door locked more often than not. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, 6 weeks after the dinner, Claire appeared in my workshop doorway. She looked nothing like the woman who'd worn designer dresses and calculated my net worth. No makeup, hair pulled back. Wearing jeans and a sweater, I recognized Eleanor's old cardigan, the green one with the patched elbow. She must have found it in a box somewhere. Dad, I set down the clock I was working on. Said nothing. She held out a key. The spare to the shop. I don't deserve to have it. She placed it on my workbench. Then she sat in the chair, the same chair Thomas had used. The same chair every broken person who'd entered this workshop had used, and put her head in her hands. I don't know how to come back from this, she said. I don't know who I am without the lies. I built my whole life on wanting more. And now I have nothing. And I don't even know what enough looks like. I let the silence sit. Then I reached up to the shelf and took down a clock. A small carriage clock. French. 1860s. Beautiful case. But the movement was destroyed. Gears stripped. Mainsprings snapped. Escapement shattered. I'd been meaning to restore it for years, but never found the time. This clock hasn't worked in over a century, I said, setting it between us. Every part that makes it run is broken. Most people would throw it away. Claire looked at it. Can you fix it? Not alone. It needs new parts machined by hand. Weeks of work. Maybe months. I paused. You'll come every Tuesday and Thursday. 2 hours. You'll learn to use the tools your mother taught me. And while we fix this clock, maybe you'll figure out how to fix yourself. Why? Her voice cracked. After everything I did. Because your mother wrote that letter 9 years ago. She didn't write, "Give up on our daughter." She wrote, "I pray you choose to." She left you a door, Claire. I'm just keeping it open. Claire picked up the broken carriage clock, turned it over in her hands. Something shifted in her face. Not redemption. Not yet, but the beginning of something. A first tick, after a long silence. The trust fund stays locked for 5 years, I said. Conditional on demonstrated character. Margaret Chen monitors it. You can't charm your way through this one. I know. And Derek. I never want to hear his name again. I wound the breguet and set it on the bench between us. Its steady tick filled the workshop. 200 years of perfect time. Still counting. Your mother used to say that clocks aren't just machines, I told her. They're promises. Promises that time matters. That moments are worth counting. Claire wiped her eyes. I wasted so many moments. Then stop wasting them. Start now. She picked up a polishing cloth and began cleaning the carriage clock's case, her hands uncertain but willing. We worked in silence while the breguet ticked, and the rain fell on Bull Street, and Savannah moved forward around us. Above my workbench, Eleanor's photograph smiled down. I looked at her, at our daughter, at the slow beginning of something I couldn't name yet. Can you hear it, love? The first tick. My name is Henry Callahan. I'm 68 years old. I fix clocks. 2 years ago, I discovered my daughter was counting down to my death. I documented everything, hid evidence inside the timepieces my wife and I had restored together, hired a man who made sure no one escaped justice. And on a January evening, I played my daughter a recording she never knew existed. I broke her world to save it. Now we sit together in a workshop full of broken clocks, learning what Eleanor always knew, that restoration takes patience, that some mechanisms need to be completely disassembled before they can work again. That time is the one thing you can't cheat. Claire comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She's learning to file brass and true a gear train. Her hands are getting steadier. The carriage clock is starting to take shape. Thomas writes from Charlotte. He's designing a community center for veterans. He sounds like himself again. Derek Saunders sits in a Chatham County holding cell, awaiting trial on 12 counts. He is not in Costa Rica. He is not free. He is paying for what he did. And Eleanor's Breguet pocket watch sits on my workbench, ticking faithfully, keeping time the way it has for almost 2 centuries. A clock with a secret compartment. A wife's final gift. A father's last resort. Some people measure wealth in dollars. I measure it in ticks. Steady, reliable, honest. Every second counted. Every moment earned. If you've stayed through this entire story, I hope you never have to live it. Don't let money replace love in your family. Don't ignore the signs. And if someone you trust starts asking about your will more than your well-being, pay attention. Act sooner than I did. Eleanor used to say, I fix broken things. She was right. But the hardest thing I ever fixed was the truth, and the clock is still running. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment below. And if you know someone who needs to hear it, share it. Because the best time to protect your family was yesterday. The second best time is right now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. And remember, every broken thing deserves a second chance. Even us.